Imagine discovering a painting so strange, so unsettling, that it disappeared from public view for over a century. No major museum displays it. Most art history books ignore its existence. It hides in a private collection, seen by only a handful of people in the past 100 years. And when you finally lay eyes on it, you understand why some secrets remain buried. This is the story of a nocturnal vision created by an 18-year-old artist who couldn't sleep, a young man haunted by illness, obsessed with darkness, and driven to capture something most people never want to see.
The painting is called Faun by Moonlight, and it depicts something that shouldn't exist in our rational world. A half-man, half-goat creature playing haunting melodies under a cold moon while ghostly goats follow behind like silent worshippers. Is this an innocent mythological scene? A pagan ritual frozen in time? Or the feverish nightmare of a tormented mind? The answer is far more complex and disturbing than you might expect.
Let's start with the basics, because even the fundamental facts about this painting feel unusual. Léon Spilliaert created Faun by Moonlight in 1900 when he was barely 18 or 19 years old. While other artists of his generation were studying at prestigious academies and working on grand canvases, Spilliaert chose a completely different path. He worked small, intimate, experimental. For this piece, he didn't use traditional oil paints on canvas. Instead, he selected diluted India ink, black crayon, and colored pencils applied to paper. The result occupies a fascinating space between drawing and painting, a hybrid medium that perfectly captures the ambiguous, dreamlike quality of the image itself. The physical dimensions reinforce this intimacy. The entire work measures only 49 by 63 centimeters. If you placed it on a desk, it would barely extend beyond the edges. Yet within this modest rectangle, an entire universe of strangeness unfolds.
And here's what makes this painting even more mysterious. You cannot simply walk into a museum and experience it. Faun by Moonlight remains locked away in a private collection, invisible to the public except for rare temporary exhibitions. It appeared at the Royal Academy Retrospective in London in 2020, and again at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris the following year. But outside these brief moments of visibility, it vanishes back into the shadows, much like the nocturnal world it depicts. Now let's examine what Spilliaert actually created here. The composition centers on a faun, that mythological creature combining human and goat features, playing panpipes in the darkness. But this isn't a solitary figure performing for its own amusement. A herd of goats surrounds the musician, following an eerie silence as though entranced by melodies we cannot hear. Above this strange procession, a full moon dominates the sky, casting cold, pale light across the entire scene. Spilliaert arranged every element to guide your eye on a specific journey. You begin with the lunar glow at the top. Your gaze descends to the faun at the center, and finally disappears into the shadowy mass of goats below. It's a visual path that mirrors descent itself, pulling you deeper into darkness with each passing moment.
The color palette intensifies this unsettling atmosphere. Spilliaert chose an almost monochromatic scheme, avoiding any vivid or comforting tones. No bright reds, no calming blues, no warm yellows. Only blacks, grays, and whites in subtle, shifting variations. This wasn't a limitation, but a deliberate artistic choice. The stark contrast between the dark field and the moon's pale light transforms the entire scene into something ghostly and unreal. It resembles a photographic negative,
an inverted vision where normal rules of reality no longer apply. To understand why an 18-year-old would create something so bizarre, we need to step back and examine the world he inhabited. The year is 1900, the precise turning point between centuries. Across Europe, civilization stands at a crossroads. Scientific progress accelerates at unprecedented rates. Industrial cities expand rapidly. Yet simultaneously, a powerful counter-movement emerges. A deep fascination with dreams, the occult, the unconscious aspects of human existence that science cannot explain or control. This is the golden age of symbolism, an artistic and literary movement that rebelled fiercely against both realism and impressionism. While some painters devoted themselves to capturing sunlight on water or depicting everyday bourgeois life, the symbolists pursued the opposite direction. They dove inward, exploring the mind's darkest corners, giving visual form to mystery, fear, and the unconscious.
Spilliaert belonged entirely to this movement. Look at what else was happening in 1900, and the connections become crystal clear. That same year, Sigmund Freud published The Interpretation of Dreams, revolutionizing how humanity understood the mind and opening doors to the unconscious that many wished had remained closed. In music, Claude Debussy premiered his Prélude à l'après-midi d'un faun, inspired by Stéphane Mallarmé's poem about a faun caught between reality and fantasy, unable to distinguish waking life from dream. In literature, Edgar Allan Poe continued influencing an entire generation years after his death, his tales of psychological horror and melancholy shaping how artists understood darkness and madness. Meanwhile, Friedrich Nietzsche's provocative philosophy challenged every traditional moral certainty, suggesting that beneath civilization's thin veneer lay something far more primal and dangerous. Spilliaert absorbed all of these influences like a sponge. His Faun by Moonlight reflects an entire era obsessed with mystery, with symbols that point toward truths too disturbing for direct statement, with giving visible form to invisible forces. But while other artists depicted fauns as sensual, playful creatures in sunlit glades, Spilliaert places his faun in darkness, under a cold gray sky, accompanied by goats that resemble shadows more than living animals.
To fully understand this painting's meaning, we need to explore the mythology behind the faun itself. In Roman tradition, fauns were spirits of forests and fields, associated with fertility and wild nature. Their Greek counterparts, the satyrs, served as companions to Dionysus, god of wine and ecstatic abandon. Both were typically portrayed as half-man, half-goat hybrids, masters of the panpipes, who embodied both joyful vitality and the most primitive, uncontrolled human impulses. Throughout history, fauns have been interpreted in two contradictory ways. Sometimes they appear as charming, mischievous, sensual figures, representing nature's playful side. Other times, they emerge as dark beings, connected to lust, chaos, and demonic forces. This fundamental ambiguity pulses at the heart of Spilliaert's painting. One interpretation sees the faun as a benevolent guide, playing enchanting music under the moon, while playful goats follow along, hypnotized by beautiful melodies. From this perspective, the painting depicts an innocent mythological scene, almost pastoral in its tranquility.
But there's a far more disturbing reading available. Remember that in Christian tradition, goats carry very different symbolic weight. They don't represent innocence, but its opposite. Goats are linked to sin, to the devil himself, to witches' sabbaths and unholy rituals performed under cover of darkness. Through this lens, what initially seemed like a peaceful nocturnal stroll transforms into something sinister. The Faun becomes less a simple musician and more the officiant of a dark rite, leading his followers toward forbidden practices. And then there's the most intimate interpretation of all, the autobiographical reading. Many art critics believe the Faun serves as Spilliaert's alter ego, a symbolic self-portrait of the young artist. Consider the parallels. An 18-year-old boy, chronically ill, suffering from endless insomnia, obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe and nature's darkest philosophies. The solitary faun playing for goats that resemble specters more than animals could represent the artist himself, attempting to soothe his inner demons through creative expression. Making music, which is to say, making art, to give tangible form to his fears and fantasies. Spilliaert's biographical details support this reading powerfully. He suffered from a chronic stomach ulcer that plagued him throughout his entire life. The constant physical pain led to sleepless nights that stretched into weeks, months, years. These endless hours of insomnia fundamentally shaped his artistic vision. Instead of resting like normal people, he spent the darkest hours drawing, painting, creating. His art became a way of inhabiting those liminal spaces when everyone else slept peacefully. He was also a voracious, obsessive reader. He immersed himself completely in Poe's tales of mystery and psychological horror. He admired Nietzsche to the point of copying his self-portraits and transcribing his most provocative quotes. All of these influences fed his imagination, creating a volatile mixture of melancholy, radical philosophy, and dark visions that poured directly onto paper. It's hardly surprising, then, that Faun by Moonlight feels like something born from feverish insomnia, created by someone living perpetually between waking reality and nocturnal delirium. The painting captures that disorienting state where you're not quite sure if you're awake or dreaming, if what you're seeing is real or hallucination. But here's the frustrating truth. Spilliaert never left behind a clear interpretation of this painting. He never explained what he intended to convey. No letters survive where he discusses its meaning, no diary entries decode its symbols. So today, more than a century after its creation, the interpretation remains open, unresolved, perpetually ambiguous.
What do we see when we look at Faun by Moonlight? A charming mythological scene depicting ancient pastoral traditions? A disturbing ritual that brushes against the satanic and forbidden? Or an intimate self-portrait of a young man wrestling with his own demons, using art as the only weapon available against darkness and pain? Perhaps the answer is all three simultaneously. Perhaps the painting's power lies precisely in this refusal to offer simple answers, in its insistence on remaining mysterious, unsettling, open to multiple conflicting interpretations. Like the faun itself, neither fully human nor fully animal, neither innocent nor demonic, neither clearly visible nor completely hidden in shadow, the painting exists in a perpetual state of ambiguity. This is what makes Faun by Moonlight so compelling and so disturbing. It offers no comfort, no resolution, no reassuring explanation. It simply presents us with a vision from the darkness and asks us to decide what we're willing to see. And that decision, ultimately, reveals as much about us as it does about the painting itself.